Welcome back to the channel, guys. So I'm going to be doing a training focus video today, running you over my current strength training split. I've been training for over 14 years now. Lots of different splits, from bodybuilder bro splits, 6 times a week push-pull legs. This is what I've been doing for the last 18 months, and it's been working really well for me. And it's generally the split that I would recommend for most of my busier clients. So I'm going to run you over that today and explain exactly why I'm doing it. So at the moment, I'm actually only strength training 3 times a week now. When I started training, as I say, over 14 years ago, I used to do the typical chest, back, shoulders, arms, skip legs a lot. But I was training probably 6, sometimes even 7 times a week in the gym. And it was fine back then because I was new to it. I responded really quickly, had loads of free time. Sometimes I'd go to the gym twice a day because I didn't really know what I was doing, to be honest. Whereas over the last few years, I basically brought the amount of training sessions down to the point where now I'm only doing 3 times a week in the gym. So the split that I follow is lower body, upper body, and full body. I would definitely recommend this training split if you are time deprived, if you're busy, if you travel a lot, and if you've tried different training splits in the past, maybe 4 to 5 times a week, and you've just found that you've fallen off because you don't have enough time. So I'm going to jump into the whiteboard over here and run you over exactly how to actually structure it. So not just what training days, I'm going to run you over all the movements and the exercise selection and why. Okay, so first training day of the 3-day split, lower body leg day. I'm always a fan of starting with legs because I think it's the most taxing session of the week. So we just want to get it out of the way. Most people hate leg day. So this is how I would structure it. This does not include warm-up exercises. We would generally put a couple of warm-up exercises in for the client, but that would be dependent on whether they've got any stretches that they need to work on, whether they've got any imbalances. So after that, we would then go into a bilateral squat variation. Now, personal preference there, we would generally program either a barbell back squat or, for example, a hack squat, or you could even do a pendulum squat. So big, neurally fatiguing bilateral movement at the start of the session. That is going to be responsible for, building a good amount of muscle. And generally we would have this exercise in, I would say, probably the 5 to 10 rep range. I'm not saying you should work in a 5 to 10 rep range, but we might have phases of training where you work on maybe 4x5 or 6x8 or maybe 8x10, for example. Then I always like to move on to a unilateral lower body movement. So something like a split squat. You could have a front foot elevated split squat. You could have a rear foot elevated split squat. You could have a reverse lunge, a walking dumbbell lunge, something like that. And for this exercise, I would like to generally, these exercises I would like to generally stick to a 8 to 12 reps each leg. Sorry, terrible spelling there, but 8 to 12 reps each leg to stimulate hypertrophy there. Really, really good to reduce and remove. Well, you're never going to fully remove imbalances, but most people will have one side that is dominant and stronger than the other. So doing unilateral variations like this will help to reduce imbalances. And if you do running or any other sport like that, it's really important to have unilateral movements in your training plan. After that, we move on to the isolation work. So these movements here, what we call compounds, so multi-joint movements. Then we move on to isolation work. So again, it really depends how long you have to do a training session. I've built this training session with just literally 5 or 6 exercises in for the busier people. If you have more time, you can put other isolation exercises in as well. But we would almost always have a hamstring isolation movement in a client's training plan on a lower body day. And we'd almost always put some hamstring work in on the 3rd day of the week, which I'll get onto in a second, because I find that a lot of people are quad dominant because they usually do a lot of squats. They do a lot of leg extensions, leg press when they're younger. So we like to put a good amount of hamstring work in, again, to reduce imbalances. So either a lying hamstring curl or a seated hamstring curl variation. If you do have one leg that is significantly stronger or weaker than the other, you could do a single leg variation here. I would generally just finish off with 2 to 3 sets of leg extensions. And for both of these movements, we'd probably work in a 10 to 15 rep range. Again, high volume there to get a good pump and finish off the session. And then at the end of the session, we would definitely have calves, similar rep range there, probably 10 to 15. If calves are a massive weakness, they used to be for me, I actually put them at the start of the lower body session now, so I can just allocate a little bit more energy to them. But that is training day 1. Okay, so training day 2, a little bit neater this time round. So it goes without saying, when you're training 3 days a week, the sessions might have to be a little bit longer, just so you can actually get the required amount of training volume in over the course of the week, but obviously you're not training as often. So for these sorts of training sessions, I would probably budget 70, maybe 75 minutes, including warm-ups. So upper body training session, as I say, after the specific warm-up, might be something like a face pull or some upper back mobility. We would move on to the first compound movement, horizontal press. So big fan of it, either a flat dumbbell press or a dumbbell incline press, or even a chest press machine or something like that. Generally, I like to do free weight compound movements at the start and then sometimes move on to machine work. So for most clients, we would almost always program an incline dumbbell press onto a horizontal pull, seated row, chest supported machine row, wide grip seated row, anything like that, even the old school bent over barbell row. And for these two compounds here, depends obviously what phase of training you're in, whether it's more of a hypertrophy focused block or a strength focused block. Generally, again, in probably that 5 to 10 rep range there. Onto the vertical press and then the vertical pull. It goes without saying, if you've done 3 working sets on both of these movements earlier on in the workout, you're going to be a little bit fatigued by the time you get to the shoulder press. So as I said before, I usually like to opt for a shoulder press machine, and we would generally do a barbell or a dumbbell shoulder press in the full body session, which is session 3. So shoulder press machine there. If you have a little bit of imbalances in the shoulder, you could do something like a seated alternating Arnold press instead. But for most clients, seated shoulder press machine. Sometimes if a client wants to work a little bit more on their chest, we would program a strict dip instead of that vertical press. You're still going to get a little bit of obviously shoulder engagement as well. And you will also touch on the delts later on in the workout. Vertical pull, something like a pull down. You could do a wide grip pull down. You could do a reverse grip pull down, neutral pull down. If you want to work on your pull-ups, it would be a good option to do those there as well. Sometimes if a client really wants to work on their pull-ups or chin-ups, I would put that, as the second movement of the workout, just because generally they're a little bit more taxing, but this is the structure that we generally follow for most clients. After those compound movements, again, these compounds here, we'd probably be doing in the 8 to 12 rep range. We would then move on to isolation work. So I like to go with triceps first because, again, I usually find that most people are a bit more bicep dominant because they've done that a lot when they're younger in the past. So something like a dumbbell skull crusher or a tricep push down, something like that. Just 2 to 3 working sets there in, again, that probably 10 to 12 rep range. Then onto biceps. If you want to try and isolate the bicep as much as possible, I would go for something like a dumbbell incline curl. Again, same rep range as the triceps. If you want to work a little bit more of the overall arm and bring the forearm and the brachialis into it, you could do something like a dumbbell hammer curl. And then I always like to finish off with 2 to 3 sets of dumbbell lateral raises, generally in probably, again, a 10 to 15 rep range there. Nice and high volume. I like to go lighter weight, high reps on these. I find if you go too heavy, then your traps just start taking over. And again, this is a bit of a longer session, but I do always like to put some core work at the end of my upper body session as well. Or sometimes for clients, we will do that at the end of the lower body session too. So my personal favorites would be a hanging knee raise or a straight leg raise or a cable crunch variation. So that's quite a long session. But again, if you're only going to the gym 3 times a week, you will still be training less overall throughout the entire week than following a 4 to 5 day training split. Okay, third and final training day of the week. Stick around till the end of the video and I will explain why I've structured it in this way. But full body obviously is a combination of lower body and upper body. So this is generally the way that I would structure and order the movements, kind of in order of how taxing they are on the body. So I'd always start with a deadlift variation, whether that is a trap bar, that is my personal favorite at the moment, or a Romanian deadlift variation. I don't usually program a conventional deadlift for most clients because I just find the risk versus reward in terms of getting the form right is not worth it for most people. And I think you get better glute and certainly hamstring engagement on definitely the RDL. But I like the trap bar at the moment personally, but either of those will be fine. And for this movement, again, probably in that 5 to 10 reps range, depending on what phase of training you are in. For phases of training, generally for clients, we'll cycle between kind of medium volume, traditional 8 to 10. Sometimes if the client has enough experience, we'll do a high volume block of between probably 8 to 15 reps. And then every third training block, we'll do a strength focus block where again, the reps might even go as low as 4, generally between kind of like the 4 to 6 rep range on the compounds. Vertical press after deadlift, and as I said before, either a seated dumbbell shoulder press or a barbell overhead press, same rep range as the deadlift. Vertical pull, if you're more of an advanced lifter, again, you could go for pull-ups or just a pull-down variation, as we mentioned before. I think, to be honest, you probably get a better mind-to-muscle connection with the lats doing a pull-down, as you can control the movement a little bit more, but it is cool to do, heavy weighted pull-ups every now and again. Hamstring isolation, as I say, for most clients, we'll put that in twice a week because I do find that that is a bit of a weakness for most people. And if you do want to train in a bit more of a functional manner, if you run as well, I think there's no downside to having strong hamstrings to protect your knees and protect your posterior chain. And the stronger that your hamstrings and your glutes are, it's going to protect the lower back more. Horizontal push, kind of getting towards the end of the workout now. Obviously, you've already touched on a horizontal push and movement on the full upper body day, but I would generally do a chest press machine, usually an incline press machine, because most people want to build that upper chest. Then a horizontal pull variation, anything there, you could go for a wide grip seated row, chest supported dumbbell row, chest supported machine row. And then if you've got any extra time later on in that workout, I'm aware this is quite a long one, you could do extra arm isolation. So for me personally, my biceps are probably more developed than my triceps, so I'll put in triceps twice a week now. So that, I would say, is a really good kind of template and framework that you could use to build your own 3-day strength training split. Now, obviously, there's a lot of movements in there that we could have put in there that we haven't included, but especially when you are doing a 3-day training split, it goes without saying you only have so much time in that session, and most of the people I coach do not want to be in the gym for more than 75 minutes. So I think, pick your battles with exercises and session length and things like that. You'll be able to train every muscle group in your body twice a week with that training split, which is the most important thing. That's how you're going to stimulate hypertrophy and build a really good amount of muscle, is training each major muscle group twice a week, not once a week like you see a lot of bodybuilders who take a lot of steroids doing when they're doing like one chest day a week, one back day a week. That is a training split that I have followed for almost a couple of years now. I'm doing a slightly different one at the moment. I'm actually doing 3 full body strength training sessions a week. But the reason for that is it fits my running a little bit better. But for most of the busier clients that I coach, I would say that's the most optimal training split. If you really like training, you like going to the gym 4 times a week, you could adapt that slightly. And instead of doing the full body day, you could have a shorter push day and a shorter posterior day. But I'd really recommend that training split for anyone who travels a lot and who is busy. So I hope you found that useful. We have a lot more videos on the channel that go into a little bit more depth on different training splits that I did about a year ago. You can see those in I think it's the Whiteboard Education playlist. But if you have any feedback and any ideas for new videos, please let me know.